of Frog and Toad, we've turned the Johnny order, having been for a ball of chalk. And you probably noticed as you came past that building site, they got a lot of rhyming slang, Cockney rhyming slang. And some of it's quite new. I think they've invented some of that, but it does change over the years, and people bring in more modern expressions. It really was a secret language for the costers and the Cockneys and the people who worked in the markets. They didn't always want to know, let everybody know what they were talking about, so they had this patois, this language of their own. And I have heard that the word slang comes from that. S-lang, secret language. So, you know, pay your money, take your choice.
Are you a Cockney?
I was born in Paddington, which was a village at one time. But I don't know, it just depends. Now, I'll start with Cockneys now you've mentioned it. A Cockney is someone born within the sound of Bow bells. Well, this is St Mary le Bow, and the bells of this church ring out, and if you're born within the sound of them, in other words, within the city walls. At one time the city had a wall all around it, up until about 1761. And the country people used to insult the townspeople by calling them Cockneys, which means a bad egg. It's an egg laid by a cockerel. Well, cockerels are male, they don't lay eggs, it's hens that lay eggs. So it was something that was a bit peculiar. Or it could be an addled egg, a bad egg, actually bad. Or it could be a spoilt child. That was a Cockney. But they gave that name to townspeople. And the country bumpkins, of course, we insult them back, they eventually applied it only to people living within the city of London, within the sound of Bow bells. But we don't know how far the sound of Bow bells carries. Because there is a story that in the reign of Queen Victoria, a sentry at Windsor Castle was accused of having fallen asleep at his post, which of course was a hanging offence. And he said, I wasn't asleep, I heard Great Tom, which was the bell at St Paul's, strike 13 at 12 o'clock at night. And they investigated and they found out he was right. So if the conditions are correct, if the humidity's right, and the wind's in the right direction, you can hear the bells for a long way. But the people who lived in London, who were the people who sold out on the streets, they eventually moved further east. And now, if you want to hear them talk like that with a glock stop, you have to go east on the north side into Essex, or on the south side to the Medway towns, and then you get that original sound from the people who've inherited it from their parents who moved further to east. Estuary English, I think they call it today. So not too many actual people born within the city, although that number is rising. There are 7,500 residents in the square mile. Not very many. I used to say 5,000. A couple of years ago it had obviously upped a bit. So about 7,500 living in converted buildings, warehouses, churches, all sorts of things. But life certainly to be lived coming back to the city. So that's the Cockneys. The costers were people who sold fruit and veg. In Shakespeare, there is a character in some of the plays called Costard, a clown. And usually it's a minor role, and the costard was a costard or a custard apple. It was a special shaped apple. Sometimes people call them sheep's heads. So presumably, if you've got a head like a sheep, you're not very bright. And this is why costard would be a clown in Shakespearean days. And they were the people who sold these costard apples in the streets. And then they sold other things. They sold pears and cherries and fruit and vegetable, exotic fruit like oranges and lemons. Oranges and lemons say the bells of St Clement's. There are two churches called St Clement's in the city. One is along the Strand and the other one is at East Cheap, and they both claim to be the original church. And then they had seasons for the various things that they sold. They sold spring flowers early in the year, and then by May they got rooted flowers, rooted plants people could set in their window boxes or little backyards if they got them. They got to June and the cherries, and of course there's an old song, cherry ripe, ripe I cry. I'm sure everybody's seen the musical Oliver, and there's a scene in that where people go around singing things like, won't you buy my sweet blooming lavender, 16 branches for a penny. You buy it once, you buy it twice, because it makes your clothes smell nice. And then when there was chairs to mend, oh, chairs to mend, Russian cane, bottom chairs to mend, and mackerel and milk, all these things were cried in the streets. Now they've all gone. You might, if you're very lucky, just hear the rag and bone man coming round with a lorry and an old fridge or something on the back. But most of these cries have disappeared from our lives. So London was a very noisy place. Not the sort of noise we have today, but all these people calling and crying their wares.